This week on Bruh Meets World.
We're like, oh, Eric has decided to go to New York with him. To do what? What is he going to do? What is his major? Topanga is going to NYU. Cory is married to Topanga. So them having to work it out in New York makes sense. Equally, they go to Shawn and they're like, hey, Topanga has packed his bags. You're coming along. When we're talking about the storyline, I feel like we really do Eric and Shawn a disservice.
The most disappointing thing behind this is that Eric and Shawn do not get a finale of their own.
Correct.
Shawn and Eric are basically just thrown into Cory's dream, which is essentially Topanga's dream,
Correct.
and shoved out the door. I think it's disrespectful to the characters and the fans of those characters to see neither of them get a proper ending.
When this boy meets world.
What up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Bruh Meets World.
When it's Bruh Meets World.
Your boy meets world clip show?
Your Bruh Meets World montage show. I don't know.
It's a clip show. Not for us, but this episode leans heavily on a clip show. Either way, I'm Ceej.
I am Tony Curtis.
And thank you guys for joining us again. This is what some would call the penultimate episode, at least of the series.
Yeah, we finally have made it to the last stretch. We're in this last episode. It's a two-parter. We're treating it as a proper two-parter. We're not doing both episodes at once. We're just doing the part one. But I have a lot to say. Honestly, the show didn't give us a lot, but through the montage and the storytelling that they chose to focus on, I think gave me a lot of things that I want to discuss with you. So
completely agree. Okay, before we jump into that, you guys, as always, we want to thank you so much for joining our Patreon, for having the conversations over there. We appreciate you guys for connecting with us on YouTube. So if you want to do that, go to youtube.com/BruhMeetsWorldPod. You guys have been really active on our videos over there. We also have been having conversations with you guys on Reddit. So if you have questions or if you have anything that you want to say to us, reach out to bruhmeetsworld@gmail.com or at bruhmeetsworld on all the social platforms. We love hearing from you. We enjoy having these conversations. We are getting to the end. So if you got questions, ask them now. Also, if you are new and joining us from the Pod Meets World season 4 recap, which we just recorded, go ahead and ask us your questions for seasons 5, 6, and 7, because we will be joining Pod Meets World for those season recaps as well. So if you guys have questions, send them on over. You never know.
Yeah. So should we just jump in to the finale of a show we've been watching since November 2017?
That is a conversation for the final episode, because just even looking back on this, it's actually quite amazing, and I will have so many emotions, so many thoughts when we record our final Boy Meets World episode. But until then, I think that you should tell me about this episode.
Oh, no, it's not an easy thing to do, Ceej, because this episode's a little different. So we need to approach it a little differently.
Okay.
7 years and we've just seen it flash before our eyes. From boys to men, we've reached the end and all must say goodbye. It's a real nice show, so you know what we must do. Say farewell the only way that we do. Tell us about it. We've reached the end of the road. Topanga and Cory leave for NY with Eric and Shawn joining right by their side. Tell us about it. The gang says goodbye. Tears and fears from Amy and Alan as they go off to the Peace Corps in Manhattan. Woo!
that was a surprise. I love it. Thank you so much. You guys, this is season 7, episode 22, A Brave New World, part 1. In the penultimate episode of the series, Cory is wondering whether he and Topanga should move to New York. While debating this, he has several flashbacks from their youth, including the time that she pushed him against the lockers and kissed him. Also, Jack, who has been struggling with his stepfather not giving him any money, decides to join the Peace Corps. That's part 1.
That is a very interesting way to sum up this episode.
It is. It is. I mean, but again, what do you want me to say? It's a clip show. Do we have a clip?
Okay. Right off the bat, what were your first thoughts about this episode?
My first thoughts, it's funny because early on, like almost immediately, it hits the ground running.
Mm-hmm.
Like we get one sentence, or I think 2 sentences. I don't want to move to New York. What about Topanga? Who cares about Topanga? Clip.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's a clip show. We're going to be doing this throughout. And I remembered that we did this in the finale. Do we do this in part 2?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So I was like, we're getting so many clips and it's kind of crazy. And then I remembered while watching it that we get towards the end and Shawn says, you can't do this. We got to say goodbye for an hour. And I was like, it's an hour-long finale. I see you. So we'll continue to do this into part 2. Overall, I will say, I know, like everyone, be prepared. I like Cory in this episode.
Oh,
This may be some of the most romantic and considerate Cory has been in quite some time in this episode, in my mind.
yeah.
And I don't want to spend too much time in the beginning, at least, talking about what we do with everyone else, because seriously, we're just like, oh, and then there's other people. So that's my first thoughts.
Okay. Let's you and me hop in the DeLorean and go back 24 years to May 5th, 2000, when
Yes.
this episode and part 2 both aired back to back. I was inconsolable. I
Were you?
was a mess. And obviously a lot of that had to do with part 2, so I don't want to talk too on that this week.
Yeah.
But this was an event that I was aware of.
Yep.
I knew the finale was happening. I was like shook into my core. I didn't know what I would do without this show as part of my lineup. Can I just say one thing about this too? I feel like present day, like Gen Zers or whatever, don't understand what it was like to have a lineup, to have a show that was consistently a part of your life week after week for years and years and years.
That's a really good point.
It's almost like a friend that you regularly check in with, compared to just like catching up with a friend that you haven't seen in 3 years all at once, the way that binging would have you do. Like this was someone that you had a consistent relationship with. So saying goodbye to these characters, especially at that age where I had grown up with them, was a very emotional process for me. This part 1 is a clip show. I want to talk about the role of clip shows in general with you.
I wanted to have that same conversation, so I'm glad we're doing this.
But let me just say that I think that this show, this episode, is a perfect use of the clip show format. I've seen a lot of series do this, and there's a purpose to them, so we'll talk about that. But I really like the clips that were chosen, how they worked them into the storyline, like with the understanding like that, hey, this is the language of this episode is going to be through clips. I thought that they worked with that challenge and actually did really well with it. So I am excited to jump in and talk about the specifics and, you know, kind of mention those things I said, but just kind of give an overall perspective. I was emotional watching it then, still emotional watching it now.
So it's interesting that you say that, because both in my summary and what you're kind of painting the picture is this idea of the clip show being almost Cory's memories. And for me, I was like, are these clip show for this clip show, are these memories that Cory is having relevant to the situation that he is in, or are these clips specifically for the audience? And I honestly
think it's that one.
I think it is too.
Yeah.
And because I think it's that way, I was like, that's where I kind of, I don't want to say I have a problem with it, because I do think that it worked well. I think that what they were doing was they were reminding us what this show was about. I do think it's interesting that when you try to remind us what this show is about, you don't pull from any recent seasons except the comedy. Like that was very important to me because I do want to talk about the different clips,
Mhm.
who they used clips, who they showed clips of,
Yeah.
and how they painted that person's character through clips.
Sure.
Um,
But to your
but
point, I was just going to say, yes, the clips were chosen for an audience, and I can understand watching the show, especially now. It feels like almost a detachment from the story because you're like, oh, this is for us. This is in a separate world than what's going on with the characters in the A plot. It's almost like there's an A plot and the B plot, and the B plot is the clips.
correct.
And
Perfectly
so
said.
it's hard, I think, to if you don't have any emotional stakes with the show, I think that this episode probably won't mean as much to you. And one of the things I wanted to say about clip shows and like why I think they were so important, and by the way, Boy Meets World is not the only show with a clip show. This was a common practice of shows in the days before binging, before DVDs, probably even before syndication started, where it was like, hey, we want to remind people, we want to catch people up on episodes they may have missed, because otherwise there's no way for them to rewatch them. It aired. This is going back to like the 60s and 70s with television.
Correct.
The episode aired. There's no way to rewatch it. There's no way to catch up everyone. Let's do a clips montage to help catch the audience up and let everyone know what's going on. One thing I always love is the community episode of this, where the joke is that they throw in a bunch of clips that don't exist in the show's history, that never happened, because it was such a staple for television. Obviously now we're lucky to get 8 episodes of a show, so they're not going to waste an episode on a clip show. What I think this series did really well with the clip show format is that it saved it for the finale. There are so many times where I'm rewatching a show and I'm like, why do we have a random clip montage in the middle of season 4 when the show goes on till season 7? It's so like weird when it happens in those points, but this is my favorite use of the clip show I've ever seen.
You know, I can't disagree, but I don't know. I feel like sometimes I would prefer a clip show to be just that. Like, I kind of prefer it to live outside of space and time.
Versus being woven into the narrative of the episode.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like, I personally like it when we're like, hey, this is like the Boy Meets World finale special. And, you know, you have characters who are coming in and you have a narrator and we're walking through empty sets and we do all of this kind of like remember when. Like, that's maybe other people don't, but like I like that because then it allows the clips to live on their own. That being said, it also isn't necessarily something that people will spend time watching.
Yeah.
And so I can understand why you do weave a storyline around it, but also I feel like it makes the overall storyline weaker, and we could use this time to talk to the audience about our character's next step. Because we, like you said, we in the last like 2 episodes ago, 2 episodes ago or 1 episode, I'm already forgetting, but in recent episodes we were like, hey, by the way, Jack's cut off from his parents. Okay. And Eric and Rachel and Jack are graduating. Okay.
Yeah.
And Shawn doesn't have a family anymore and Angela's not here. Okay. And all of this happened in the last few episodes. And all of that has to be wrapped up for a lot of the characters in this episode.
Yeah.
And so, like, there are no stakes. There's no real story being told. And I would much rather, like, even as a fan of the show, and even as a kid who watched this when it premiered in 2000, I would rather have a story arc and a clip show bonus, if that makes any sense. That's just my preference.
This makes so much sense, and I truly wonder what the discussion was happening in regard to this leading up to it. It's really hard for me not to talk about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air right now, so I'm gonna give a shout out to Gary Miller.
Go.
The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is the show I'm thinking about in comparison to this, because they did a clip show episode 8 of season 1. Who the fuck? Why would you do a clip show in season 1?
Yeah.
I imagine the reason was because the show had built up immense popularity since the beginning. They wanted to catch people up on the general premise, but whatever. When the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air ended, Their finale was a true finale. I think it was a part 1, part 2, and it was just one full story. However, leading up to that finale, there was an episode called Whoops, There It Is, where we see the actor Will Smith take us on a tour of the Fresh Prince set while intermixing clips as he says hello to each actor. It's a separate episode that almost leads like a workup to the finale, but just kind of like giving us behind. And it was a full episode. It aired, and it was like a true episode of the show. It was... I think that's the version of this that you're looking for. Is like, I want my clip show. I want a celebration of the series that I have come to love and know.
Absolutely.
Separate from the story that's being told. Because I will agree with you that if you were to take out all of the clips from the finale of Boy Meets World, it is a shitty finale. But because the finale interweaves these things, I think really well. I think there's a fair argument to make about like, hey, jumping back and forth is jarring. In the same way some people don't like musicals where it's like we're talking and all of a sudden we're singing. Yeah. It's like it's too much for people. I get that. But I actually think this show does it really well. And I think it needs this tool in order to have a finale that drums up that emotional catharsis that you want saying goodbye to a show. Because it reminds us of the reasons why we love these characters in the show. Not because of what they're doing now, but because of who they used to be.
You know, well, like, I agree with you, but it's interesting because I also think that for this episode, if we had made them specifically Cory's memories, I think maybe it would have worked a little bit better. Because now you're seeing what Cory's connection is with each character. We kind of do that. We kind of tell a story, but also we just kind of like cut to. And I'm thinking of, it's so funny because another one who does it the way that I'm talking about is The Nanny. You guys know I love The Nanny. And I was trying to find the particular episode. I think it's the finale part 1, but either way, I do know that there's a clip show in the last few episodes where they go and each time the main character is talking to, you know, another character, we kind of see flashbacks of their relationship. You know, it's kind of like that, oh, I've always liked you. And then it shows a clip from season 1 and it shows a clip from season 4 and all this other stuff.
I feel like this show tried to do that, but it wasn't always successful.
And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that when Cory says, who cares about Topanga? Everyone only cares about Topanga. And then they do like this clip show. Those clips aren't of Cory's memories of Topanga, but they are of the Cory and Topanga relationship. But they're not of the Cory and Topanga relationship that would support that sentence. So this is just what I'm talking about, where it's like, it's like, it's not connecting it to what they're specifically talking about in that moment. It's rather like, oh, these two characters are on screen together. Let's give the audience a flashback of the history of these characters, regardless of whose perspective it's from. It's just for the audience. And that's just like, again, like, I think it's so weird because as we're talking more about this, I wanted to talk about clip shows and I wanted to talk about how they're done and the way that they're done and how this episode did it. And I don't think that this was a bad episode. I think that it does what it's supposed to do, which is make you feel, make you remember, make you have nostalgia. But it also, it's interesting to me who gets clips and who doesn't get clips. Like, we treat Angela the same way we treat Eli and Mr. Turner. They each get half of a second of a clip, not even their own clip. And I was like, that rubs me the wrong way. We are really trying to rewrite history in this clip show. Because if we're in fact going back through time and saying, hey, do you remember all these important moments and key moments in Boy Meets World history, to erase Angela from that feels very pointed.
Well, that's part of like the major disappointment with Angela not being included in the proper finale. It's something that like was always upsetting to me as a child. Now that we're here, even after seeing the Angela's Ashes episode of last week, which by the way, I don't know if we mentioned that was directed by Fred Savage, but I just want to throw that out there.
No, we didn't.
It's even after her almost getting a whole episode to her, because of the clip show device that's being used in this finale and her being left out, not only does it take away from Angela, but I think we lose a big chunk of Shawn's storyline and perspective as well by not having a character. Like, it doesn't make sense for Jack to be included in the montage, flashback montage, and not have Angela, who was a bigger key player than Jack ever was.
For Rachel.
For Rachel, yeah.
Rachel gets montages, and we remember the time with Rachel, but then we don't have Angela, and we don't have a moment for Topanga and Rachel to be like, man, I wish Angela was here. Yeah. Again, I understand it from a storytelling perspective. I want that to be very clear to everyone. I understand it from a storytelling perspective. I understand that they wanted the main four to end up going to New York together, but it feels like that wasn't thought out. And maybe they were like, maybe we'll get a season 8 and we could do a spinoff. Who knows? I don't know. But I do know the idea that we're like, oh, Eric has decided to go to New York with them. To do what? Mind you, let's just think about this. Let's think about this just hypothetically. If Eric has decided to move with his brother and sister-in-law in New York, now that he's graduated, what is he going to do? What is his major? Topanga is going to NYU. Cory is married to Topanga. So them having to work it out in New York makes sense. Why is Eric going to New York, and what will he be doing while he's there? Equally,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Equally, Shawn.
Yeah.
They go to Shawn and they're like, hey, Topanga has packed his bags. You're coming along. Now, what do we know about this? We know that Jack signed up for the Peace Corps. Eric is now moving to New York. Shawn lives with Jack and Eric. So what was their plan?
Yeah.
Like you were like, oh, I packed your stuff so you can come with us. But in reality, we treat you like this was an inevitability because you live with these two other dudes. As you pointed out, you have no other family. Your girlfriend just went to Europe. Why not say, hey, why not have a line where it's Angela saying, hey, I want you to join me in Europe? You can still have the duffel bag. You can still have everyone leave. You can still like make it to where Shawn has a life of his own. And I just feel like that's when we're talking about the storyline. I feel like we really do Eric and Shawn a disservice because we essentially say that their lives are based around Cory and they don't need anything else of their own.
It's the most disappointing aspect of this episode and of the finale. It's for all the reasons you said, like, it doesn't make sense for these characters to go. When you remove the clips from the show, they don't even bother to really explain the reasoning why these characters would make such a profound move. Shawn leaving Philadelphia would be just as big of a deal, if not bigger, than, like, you know, Topanga or anyone else leaving. But, like, it's not a decision that he makes. Even for Eric, it's kind of made off camera and then they justify it on camera. And it's disappointing because it feels lazy. It feels like, oh, they can just go. Like, if they were going to set up like the possibility of doing a spinoff in season 8, like, I would rather you work on the pilot to bring them back from wherever they sent off from than for you to do this where it doesn't go anywhere. But ultimately, the most disappointing thing behind this is that Eric and Shawn do not get a finale of their own.
Correct.
Shawn and Eric are basically just thrown into Cory's dream, which is essentially Topanga's dream. Correct. And shoved out the door, where it's like, hey, we saw Eric go from, like, kid who didn't know what he wanted to do, stressing about getting in school, working day and night with Feeney to help him get into school. He finally gets into school. He doesn't feel like he has a purpose. He's struggling to find friends. And so for what? Ultimately, for what? To graduate college and still just be hanging out with his brother because he doesn't have any other relationships because you didn't give him any other relationships to build within that time. Same thing with Shawn. It's so, like, you know, we talked at length about all the different options they could have done with Shawn's character and with Angela in the last episode. So I don't want to go down that road again, but I think it's it's disrespectful to the characters and the fans of those characters to see neither of them get a proper ending. Yes, this is part 1 of part 2, but I know part 2 as well, and there's not that much that really gets added to them. So
to your point, what I think is, I think now, like, it would be one thing if we were criticizing this just based on like our own observations, but to hear Jeff Sherman and Jeff McCracken and all these people explain why we even had Eric go to college in the first place, which is, you don't understand how big of a deal it is for someone like you to go to college, and you going to college will help a bunch of other people go to college. If that's the case, then you robbed us of seeing Eric graduate.
Yeah.
Why, when Jack and Rachel are like, you're going to the Peace Corps, I decided to go to the Peace Corps, why are they not in cap and gowns? That is a wardrobe change. If they are in cap and gowns, there is an implication that they graduated. We are showing that they did it. They made it to the finish line. You get what I'm saying? Like, and that's literally just wardrobe. That's all we
The
need.
Peace Corps thing, honestly, is just as abrupt as moving the other characters to New York. Yes, the Peace Corps was kind of, I think, thrown out as a random idea in the last episode. But again, we know nothing about what Jack or Rachel have been doing the entire time they've been in fucking college. What are they studying? What do they want to do with their lives? We don't know. So we could just have them do anything. Having Jack go to the Peace Corps is so wrong for who that character has shown himself to be, because what they could have done was spend this year having Jack obsess about money.
Yes.
Show him getting maybe cut off from his dad at the beginning of the school year, and he's working jobs, he's doing all these things, trying to think about what his next money move is going to be. Meanwhile, he has a full Scrooge McDuck turn by the end of the season where he's like, I'm going to go to the Peace Corps, I'm giving it all up. That would have been a beautiful arc. That's not what happens in this show for Jack at all. It's just a random idea. Oh, Rachel's going? Oh, I kind of want to bang her, I'm gonna go.
Actually, what's funny and what's interesting is rewatching it, I thought what you just said. I thought Rachel decides to go, and then Jack decides to go.
Well, Rachel mentioned it last week.
She mentioned it.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying, as soon as she mentioned it, Eric Jack's like, oh, maybe I'll do it. Oh, no.
No, but here's the thing. What happens is Jack, as the audience, we find out Jack signed up first. Then Jack goes to Rachel and says, oh, you're going as well? So it wasn't even Rachel's idea. They didn't even have this conversation simultaneously. They decided independently off screen to both go into the Peace Corps, and even Rachel's decision doesn't make sense for her. It makes more sense for Jack. Like, if you switch those two, where Rachel goes, I did it, I'm doing it, I'm going to the Peace Corps, and then Jack says, you know what, I'm going to join you. I thought you were going to go see the world. Again, Jack, the person with the finances to do so. But now that I'm cut off, actually, maybe I should do some good in it first. That makes way more sense than Jack deciding to go independently, not knowing that Rachel was going. Rachel deciding to go independently, not knowing that Jack was going. And now they're all going, and Rachel has canceled her told trip to us around the world to go to the Peace Corps to do good, when, again, as you said, we haven't seen any remnants of them wanting to be this type of person.
The only person who it makes sense to go to the Peace Corps is season 1 Topanga. It literally does not make sense for Rachel or Jack. Show us Rachel helping out, volunteering. Show us that this is a passion of hers, that it's on her heart. Show her having a come to Jesus moment where, like, she had something tragic happen and like a homeless person died or something that she formed a relationship with. We have nothing to lead her to do this.
Why not? Like, just because they mentioned travel around the world, why not have Jack say, actually, I'm going to travel, and have Shawn go with him? Hey, I got you a ticket. We're going to do what we always said that we were going to do. We're going to explore this world together. And now we have a reason for Shawn to pack his bags and go as well. Like, I'm just saying, like, what we're talking about is we have been watching this show for us for 7 years.
Yeah.
And as an audience for 7 years. And you want to know that the characters that you have been following all end up doing something in the vein of what we've known from them.
Well,
And
and
it feels very much like we just gave these side characters side side quest almost.
it's yes, it feels like we didn't do anything because part of that reason, I think, is that they didn't set anything up for this ending. Like, for example, we saw in the future reunion episode that Shawn and Jack weren't close and the predicted future of them not staying close as friends. So why not have Jack and Shawn go off into the sunset together, have a moment? Maybe, you know, Jack says, I sold the trailer. Here's the money for it. Go do something with your life. Have some, I don't know, something to believe that the arc is coming to a satisfying close. Can I also just say that even when they try to insert the clips for each character, I think that you really saw within that how weak some of these characters were. When they were trying to do a flashback of Rachel and Jack, it did not work in the same way a Shawn and Cory flashback worked.
So it's so funny because what I think, as you said, because you said that these clips were for the audience, I was looking at this being like, if these clips are for the audience, what are they trying to tell us?
Yeah.
And what the takeaway from the clips that were selected, and I'm gonna go character by character. For Topanga, they reminded us of her origins and her hippie lifestyle. They reminded us of the Cory and Topanga love story. They reminded us that Topanga has always been all in and that Cory fucked it up.
Yes.
They reminded us that, but that Topanga was forgiving, and they reminded us that Topanga has always made the first move. They want to sell their love story as Cory has always known, but it's always been
Topanga kissed her against the locker. Topanga's the one who came back from Pittsburgh. Like, it's Topanga's the one that said, will you marry me? It's always been Topanga making the moves.
It's always been Topanga. And even now, Topanga is the one who needs to make a move. And I want to come back to that because, again, I think this episode does a great job with Cory. But then I said, so we did Topanga. Then we get Eric. And what do we learn from Eric? Eric is silly. Eric is funny. That is it. Eric is their legacy.
They really cut
Eric,
out. They cut out so much of like the sincere parts of Eric's personality and story. Like, we don't get anything with him and like the kids that he's affected over his life. We don't get anything of him trying to get into a better school or any of that. All of that's deleted from the show.
Exactly. So what they want us to remember about Eric is that he was the funny one.
And also, they only showed clips from basically season 5 and 6, which almost lets us know that, like, oh, we only appreciate this version of Eric versus we didn't really know what to do with the old one.
Correct. Then we get the story of, I already said the story of Cory and Topanga and how they get up to.
Can I mention one thing about Cory and Topanga's flashback before we move on too much? So when they do Cory and Topanga's like love, the relationship flashback or whatever, you see Long Walk to Pittsburgh, you see the ski episode, you see how important those specific 2 episodes were, not just for Cory and Topanga, but also for the show at large. But what the montage does in a great way is show how soon after Long Walk to Pittsburgh, Cory hooks up with Lauren. It's like Long Walk to Pittsburgh, immediate cut. You lied to Topanga. And honestly, that's kind of what happened. When we were watching those seasons, we were like, wow, like, there's no romance building between these two. He just goes from like, Mom, I love her, to I lied and I cheated with Lauren. And it just happens. Just like that.
And then right after that, we get, hey, a fresh start. And right after the fresh start, she's proposing. So again, it shows their relationship. But I think for me, they were doing these highlights to be like, hey, this is the romantic story of Cory and Topanga. But as someone, especially as an adult who's watching it, I'm like, you've actually just showed me the flaw in their love story.
Exactly. And thank you for saying that, because that's what I've been trying to articulate is like a lot of the times these clips and flashbacks actually are revealing cracks within these characters and stories versus reminding us, at least now, like at the time I originally watched it, I was all in and I was just watching it as montage. But now I'm like, wow, like, Topanga and Cory's relationship isn't that strong. We've been saying that for 7 seasons, and even this flashback confirmed that for me.
Correct. Then we get Jack and Rachel. What I thought was interesting is we actually show we show Rachel's character's physical comedy,
Mm-hmm.
and we show, but we show her ability to do comedy.
Yeah.
Also, there's something sexual about all of her clips as well. So
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting, because that's how the show wants us to remember her. And I
Sure.
honestly even think the funny parts that they showed were kind of to be like, well, we can't be too sexual with her,
Yeah.
but we will show. And then also anything else that they would have to show would include Angela. And I just like I'm thinking about like what we are curating out of all of the clips, out of all the stories
Sure.
that we could tell. We could do that. Then we get the Cory and Feeney flashback, which we remember him
Wait,
as this
I'm
guided
sorry.
advisor.
Can I say one thing about the Rachel flashback sequence? As soon as the Rachel flashback sequence starts, in my mind, I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Not only because of the Angela of it, but also because of the Amy of it all. Like, and I truly don't remember if Amy and Alan get their flashback due in part 2. It's been like a year or so since I've seen it, so I have to rewatch it. But for like, I had to have a character like Amy who's been so important to the entire series, and to see Rachel get the flashback treatment over her, I was just like, this just feels off. It feels wrong. It doesn't feel like Rachel is a character who deserves this, not because of anything Rachel has done, like we said, like she's been giving a great performance as the character Rachel, but they just haven't done anything with her character to put emotional stakes behind saying goodbye to her.
Completely agree. That I completely agree. And then we get Jack, and Jack's flashbacks
With
are
Eric.
around Eric. I was like, we get a Jarek moment, but we also, like, again, if we're going to talk about like what they want their legacy to be, they want it to be that these two were your like Chandler and Joey pairing. They were the goofball dynamic duo. Kind of like one is the straight man, one is wacky, Pinky in the brain. And then they also give us a little moment of like, I love you. No, dude, I love you.
Yeah.
There's a woman calling us and we're going to fight over her. So it's not really gay. We avoid all hints of any gayness because there is a pursuit of a female in there.
The one thing I noticed about the Jack and Eric montage was that, first of all, when Eric approaches Jack to say, I'm going to New York, Jack just goes, good. Jack feels so whatever. He doesn't give a shit about saying goodbye to this person who they want us to believe is his best friend.
Correct.
And so what was interesting is that when they started doing the clips, other than every now and then that dude, I love you, there was nothing that really made me feel like they were really best friends. In fact, I'm watching this episode thinking that Jack considers Eric a friend from college that he's going to move on with his life and never talk to again, and not really miss that much. Like, yes, we've had these Jarek theories, but I'm saying just based off of this episode and the clips they chose, I don't feel like their friendship is as strong when you compare it to the Shawn and Cory montage, which obviously there's more years for, but I'm like, Jack and Eric have been friends for 3 years now, and they've done jack shit with it.
Haha. Like, it's funny that you say that, but you know, I will admit that the show wants us to believe that the ultimate pairing here is Jack and Rachel. Because not only do we get a Jack and Rachel pairing, but we also get like the clip where they first meet, and it's like, I don't like them. You know, like, oh, we have so much in common, but I don't like them. You're right in the sense that like they kind of treat it in the same way that like I believe Jack and Cory's friendship actually
100%. Yeah.
But they want, because Rachel and Jack are leaving together to go to the Peace Corps, they are in a way end goal. Like they are in a way, like what you're saying through storytelling is that they found their end together, even if it's as friends. Whereas with Jack and Eric, you're right in the sense of, hey, I think it's good that you're going. And that's it. We don't really talk about the weight and how important this has been to each other. And all of our Jarek theories, we have tons of evidence to support this, but that's not what they want us to focus on. And again, I want to say it's because they want to make sure that we understand that this was not a gay pairing. And I say that because we get clips of Eric's obsession with Rachel. And it's so funny. I remembered the clip of, you know, what's Eric's favorite fish?
Penguin. Yeah.
I know my man. They're not dating at that point in time.
No.
They were matched up for the sake of the game, for the sake of playing the game.
Yeah.
But the show wants us to remember that relationship more than it wants us to remember Jack and Eric being as close as they were.
It's frustrating because the show almost wants us to think of Jack, Eric, and Rachel as this love triangle, which they haven't been in over a year. That was
Correct.
such a season 6 storyline that faded away. Jack and Rachel hooked up, it went nowhere, and they didn't do jack shit with it. So it's like, for them to end up together at the end, it's almost like, well, why didn't they build to a reunion between these couples? Why didn't, like, Eric have a I don't know, some kind of moment where he accepted these two as his friends like he did with season 6, and he was happy that they were together and moving on? I don't know. It just feels like they really squandered the opportunity to make these relationships meaningful. And I'm watching these clip shows too, and I'm like, there's not a lot here. There's not a lot of evidence to make me sad that I'm not seeing this friendship the same way I am that about Cory and Shawn.
Speaking of Cory and Shawn, we get our clip show with them where we show the history of their friendship. And like, even in the very beginning, we were like, can't you just dance with me for a little bit? Topanga's decided not to go. And we have like the dancing montage, and
I wish they would have relearned the handshake for the finale.
Maybe, but also, like, it's funny. I think it worked by having them do the dance and then cutting to it, because in reality, we haven't seen them do that in forever.
Yeah.
So it'd be like if all of a sudden Cory was obsessed with baseball again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's the equivalent of having Stephanie Tanner say, "How rude" in the final episode. It's like, you haven't said that in forever. What are we doing?
Sure.
I will say we also get Feeny, and Feeny's clips are how do they want us to remember Feeny? They want us to remember this wise old mentor of a person, and they don't give us any of like the fun Feeny, the crafty Feeny. It's
the
like
romantic Feeny.
The romantic Feeny. They are specifically trying to tell us, hey, this is what we want you to remember about these characters, which is fine in a clip show, but for a finale, it kind of, I'll say, takes a shortcut to pulling our heartstrings, because if you were paying attention at all, if you were actively invested, you should want to know where these characters end up. You should want to know that Feeny is spending the summer honeymooning with the dean, because they never really got to do so. You know, we should take a moment. Like, I think about the Friends finale, and I think about the fact that we actually understand what's going on with every character. We understand that Rachel has rejected the job and will continue on with Ross. We understand that Monica and Chandler are moving to a house in the suburbs and they have twins. We understand that Phoebe is now married and she got her happy ending. We don't really know about Joey, but again, they had a spinoff planned, and that's why it's kind of left loose. But also, the whole point of that is to say, not everyone needs to be married in order to have a happy ending.
Sure.
So we get an entire explanation of all of these characters when we are doing our finale. Spoilers for Friends, a show that's finale is 20 years old.
Yeah.
But when I look at this, I'm like, I'm not really getting that everyone gets their happy ending. I get that everyone is moving on in ways that I don't know make sense for their characters.
I also think probably the biggest flaw, and don't get me wrong, guys, I had a ton of shit I loved about this episode, and I'm going to get into that in a bit too. But one of the things I noticed is that the show, this episode and the next episode, really focuses on the perspective of the kids. It's like, let's show the history of all of these kids and how they interacted with the world around them, the adults that are in their lives. The problem is that Boy Meets World has not always been a show from the perspective of the kids. Like, this isn't always been Dawson's Creek. It turned into that in college. It turned into like a teen-based show. But prior to that, the teachers and the parents were just as much of the show, if not the biggest part of the show. I think going into season 1, Bill Daniels was probably the biggest name that they had as a draw. So it's odd for the show to treat it like, oh no, this has always been from the perspective of kids, and now we're going to show them. It's like, actually, to not include Feeny, Amy, and Alan in a bigger way, it's creating a hole. Also,
Yes.
I've never seen a bigger fuck you to Morgan.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't know what clips are in the part 2, so forgive us if you're yelling at me going, oh, they're going to get to it. But in general, like, they just are forgetting about her and not including her in any of this.
Correct. I do think there's more Morgan in part 2, but I want to talk about that. But I believe it's just one more clip because I remember the clips that we get of Morgan, and I believe it's just one more clip. But I'll say this. I will say that to your point, the point of a clip show and the point of these clips is to kind of take us on a journey of the show as it's been.
Yeah.
And remind us what we're losing on a week-to-week basis. We have grown up with this show. This is one of the very few shows that we talk about that as kids, we met in middle school, we went to high school, we went to college with. So we actually grew up with these characters. We watched them. They were our older brothers and sisters. They were our family. And the way that this show treats the majority of the characters, especially at the end, feels very slapped together and rushed.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're calling out. All of that said, do you have anything else you want to say that like you had problems with? Because I do want to get into what I loved about this episode.
Not really. I mean, I think, like I said, like I pretty much gave all the grievances I had for this episode so far. I think the more we talk about it, the more I'm realizing, like, as our conversation goes on, how weak of a finale it is without the clips. And I say that because one of my favorite things about this episode, which we're going to get into, is I love the clips. I love the clips that were they're chosen. They worked the way they were intended to work for me. I'm so curious if when they got their final script, if it says cut to this clip, this clip, this clip, or if they just shot it as one episode as is, because that episode probably is dog shit without the clips.
It's so funny because we can ask Gary, but I believe Gary said that they were very specific about the clips that they chose. And that's why I'm spending so much time talking about the clips, because they said that they spent so much time talking about the clips, which means that every clip that we see is in fact intentional and was probably in the script. You know what I'm saying?
I have to imagine that some of what made it into the various clip montages in the episode was, hey, what was the cute, memorable moment from this season? What was the memorable moment from that season or this character? And it feels like, unlike us who are binging everything and kind of have meticulous notes on all these episodes, they were just going more based off of like, hey, what do you remember liking? Or what do you think would be fun for this? Because some of the clips are kind of random.
They are 100%. And that's kind of what I'm saying. Going back to like the core of the story. As we know, this episode is truly about Topanga's decision to go to New York and Cory being like, I don't want to go to New York. Topanga saying, hey, we don't have to go. And then Feeny being like, do you know why Topanga did this? This is not the first time that Topanga was given the opportunity to move on and do great things in her life.
Sure.
But she's never failed. She's always done well here. She was a big fish in a small pond, or as Feeny uses, the garden metaphor. And I do like that they say, I love that we're doing the garden metaphor. I love the garden metaphor because it is something about this. I love that they also say, give me the usual when we haven't done the usual in forever.
Can I say something about that, which I really love? At that moment, Cory is by the fence and he's like telling him like, oh, give me the flower metaphor, give me the, the thing you're known best for. Call me Mr. Matthews, all that I love. What Cory says is, Topanga doesn't want to go because of me. And then he stops himself and goes, now get me. I know you can get me. And it's almost in that moment like, wow, maybe Cory has more self-awareness than he's been letting on, because he knew that he needed to be called out on this, like, thing that he kept projecting out to different people. He said to Shawn over and over again, like, we can't do this. Topanga, she's leaving because of me, all this shit. But Feeny was the one who was like, this actually has nothing to do with you.
To your point, what I was going to say is that when Feeny has a conversation with Cory and he's like, I thought it would stop growing if it stayed where it was at.
Yeah.
Cory does something that is self-aware, and that it is interesting that the show chooses this moment to acknowledge. Cory goes, Topanga, I need to go to New York.
Yeah.
I need to grow. And what he's saying is, I know that I make everything about me. So
Yeah.
for me to tell you that I think you should go wouldn't be in my character. What's in my character is to make it about me and for you to use me as a scapegoat.
Well, also what the show is basically saying is that if Cory doesn't make it about him, it's not going to happen.
Correct. And but like, how great is that? Like, I don't like that that's a truth.
He's
but
using his privilege for her.
He is. Like, it to me, when they did that, when he was like, Topanga, like, I gotta grow. You're keeping me from growing. I need to go to New York.
Yeah.
That was very interesting because they acknowledge, oh, this character thinks everything's about him. So for him to do something selfless is actually a big romantic gesture for him to put aside his wants and needs and think about his wife, his new family.
Sure.
Like, think about his future. For Cory to do that, that is a big deal.
Well,
and they treat it as such.
Can I just say that it would have been a bigger deal if Shawn and Eric didn't go with him? It would have been a bigger deal if Cory was making this choice and choosing Topanga over Shawn, or if that was
He is. Let's think about it.
Cory, I know he doesn't know yet.
Yeah,
he doesn't know Shawn's going yet. But I'm saying that even the reveal of it afterwards almost weakens the gesture, because it's like, oh, well, everything's going to work out for Cory anyway. Just like he wanted everyone to go to the same college. Guess what? Everyone's going to the same city he is, and everything's going to still work around his life and preferences.
It doesn't weaken it. It rewards him. And I think this is really important because when we're talking about people who are narcissistic and selfish, like, they only do things that benefit him. So the idea that he would make the sacrifice and say, hey, I'm not going to get everything that I want out of this, but I'm doing what is important for my marriage.
Yeah.
By Topanga saying, here's your bag, Shawn is coming with us. What the show is saying is, you are being rewarded because the fact that you were able to think about Topanga and her needs, she too thinks about your needs. And it's in this moment that they show that they are, in fact, partners, that he is willing to do what's right for her, and she sees that and is willing to reward him with what's nice for him. It's a gift of the Magi type situation.
Yeah.
And to me, again, it's important to show someone like Cory that when you actually are selfless, it allows people to do something for you. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but again, like, so we're agreeing that Shawn moving to New York is for Cory.
Yes, no, absolutely. Like, again, we've already talked about the fact that the show doesn't actually have a reason for Shawn to go. It simply says Shawn has no ties here holding him back. He says, I got a mother, I got a father, I got a girlfriend, I got a job. And it's like, you just described someone who doesn't have anything. So why don't you just pick up your entire life and leave with your best friend? Mind you, what are you going to do in New York?
No clue. No, not even a shred of evidence given to what these characters are going to do once they get there. You know what I really needed from this episode? And maybe if there were too many clips, get rid of the Jack and Rachel clip montage and give me a conversation of Shawn and Cory before Cory goes to Topanga and says, hey, I'm gonna go to New York with Topanga, and I wanted you to know, and like something. And he's like, I don't know what this means for us. I'm always gonna be here for you as a friend, but I have to do this for my wife. I needed that exchange.
Absolutely love that idea. I love it. And this is what I'm talking about, where it's like, I like the clips, and the clips, I remember watching this as a kid and being like, I love every second of this, because I was able to relive the joy of the show that I had been watching for years. But when you look at the story, it's like, yeah, but we took a shortcut to the emotions of it, because we're not actually talking about how big of a deal this is. We're actually, like, Cory being like, I don't want to go is fine, but it doesn't actually express the importance of leaving your hometown, what it's like to decide to leave everything behind. You know, like it is huge to move. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you this, and this is a question I have in my notes. It's like, do you remember that feeling of leaving Florida for the first time? Like when it was like you're moving out of state without your parents.
Correct. Yes, I do. I moved to New York.
Mhm.
I did. I left college and I moved to New York, and that is a big deal. Like, first of all, packing is a big deal. Talking about what you're going to do. Like, did I have any real plans? No, I actually was just like, I'm going. I'm just gonna like be on the spur, and that's my plan, and I'll figure it out. But I also still at least said that to other people.
Yeah.
I said my goodbyes to individuals. We talked about the importance of that decision and not staying. And that's what I'm saying is that your idea of like, you have to actually have this sit down conversation and say, hey, I'm making this choice for my wife.
Yeah.
And I love you and I will miss you. And I can't imagine life without you. But this is what has to be done. That would show so much growth.
And that's part of the problem is that like I said this with Shawn and Eric, but even with Cory, like to really get an arc, to really make it feel like Cory has learned something over the last 7 years, I think I needed a little bit more than well, I need to go to New York for me, Topanga. Like, I appreciate that gesture and I understand what that means for Cory. I just like, so you're saying that after 7 years of watching The Boy from Boy Meets World, I don't know what his life becomes after this, and I have no clue as to what's going to happen with it, other than he's going to be there for his wife. Like, it still feels empty if I'm a Cory fan.
Yeah, well, I agree, but if you're a Cory fan, specifically if you're a Cory fan of this show, there are two relationships you care about: Cory and Topanga, Cory and Shawn.
Yeah.
So, I said one of the reasons why we shoehorn Shawn going to New York is to say, hey, that relationship's not actually having to be challenged by distance at all. Like, if we were going to talk about meeting world, what's more of meets world than your best friend has moved away and you have to figure out how to keep in touch? Like, that is a big part of meets world. In Long Walk to Pittsburgh, they talk about the ending of Wonder Years and the idea of the main characters not getting together and being like, oh, I saw Winnie with her husband and my wife at a train station, and implying, hey, our lives went different ways, but we were able to come back together at a different time. So I know that they needed Cory and Topanga to be endgame. They are flying off together. But what's more of a meets world, you have to grow up type situation than you moving away from your best friend and being like, hey, I'm going to go start my own life. Thank you for getting me this far.
100%. Also, again, would have probably been more powerful if they moved somewhere else. And I don't mean this as like anything other than New York is a 120-minute train ride from Philly. You know what I mean? Like, it's not even that far. I drive longer than that to get to other places of LA.
70 miles?
It's an 82-mile trip. But I'm just saying, an hour and 20 minutes, that's like a ride to OC. Like, that's nothing. You know what I mean? Like,
but here's the thing. When your friend moves, as someone who, my best friend lives just in Southern LA, I'm like, oh, we'll see each other once a month, maybe.
Yeah, but it's still doable. It's not like, and yes, there is like a chapter of like, we used to wake up and see each other all the time. I love that ending, but I think, again, like, it just weakens it to have Shawn join this. I hate Shawn going to New York. It makes more sense for Eric, I think, to go to New York than Shawn.
Let's talk about the fact that they have Amy be like, I don't want my baby to go. They're children, blah, 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 blah. And then Eric's decided to go to New York, and she's like, oh, okay, cool. And it's like, but this is not how Amy
I'm so glad you brought that up.
She doesn't hate her son. She actually loves her children. She cares. Don't get me wrong. She has always been someone who is harder on Eric. But again, it's like the show wants us to remember Eric as being this goofball who people couldn't wait to get away from.
Sure.
And not as the eldest child who Alan and Amy raised and would have had some attachment to. You know what I'm saying?
It's insulting to Eric on so many levels to have Amy feel that way. But again, it's just like it makes Eric seem like he's a character that means nothing to no one. Like in within the world he's in, he has no best friend, he has no family that really wants him around. This is the saddest character, maybe even sadder than Shawn, because at least Shawn has people who want to be around him. Like no one wants to be with Eric.
To your point, like if we're going to be honest, if you were telling a story, and they would never do this, but if you were telling a story about someone who was leaving, it makes more sense to have Eric leave the episode before Angela's ashes. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Graduate and him be off and do his whole thing, and he's not in the finale. Like that makes more sense.
You know what I would have loved if instead of Angela's ashes, we got the college graduation episode we've been asking for. Eric, Jack, and Rachel all do their goodbyes there. Because if I had to choose, like I would rather leave on a note knowing Eric finished college and is going off into the world doing his own thing, and to eliminate Jack and Rachel from the finale than to do what we did here. Because at least that honors Eric's overall arc compared to what we got.
And also, it would make sense again if we're talking about lessons, life lessons, and not just sitcom lessons, but life lessons. Having Shawn stay behind and finish school with Angela makes more sense. Not only is it more realistic, but it's more of a story arc for Shawn. And I can't let go of the fact that, like, no, y'all went out of your way to get rid of Angela. I do want to get back on. I just want to end on the conversation of Cory and Topanga, and Cory being like, hey, I need you need to go. And Topanga saying, I've never failed. Well, and he goes, you haven't. And she goes, but what if I do? He goes, then I'll see someone who tried and failed, but at least she tried. And that is so important. Because at that point in time in your life, you are, well, especially after you graduate, you do get opportunities to leave home, to go to different places. Maybe it's the Army, maybe it's an internship, maybe it's New York, maybe it's Peace Corps, who knows? But you do get all these opportunities and they shift your life. And the ideal of failure and, oh, I've never been challenged this way is huge. So the fact that they would give the two of them this moment and actually show why this marriage and partnership works. And like we have talked down and time again about Cory and how selfish he is and how much he makes everything about him. But this one scene of Cory actually being like, hey, I want my wife to be the best version of herself. And if that means that we uproot our lives to do it, then that's what we do. And even if you fail, you will be a star in my eyes because you will have taken a chance, and taking a chance is what life is about. That is so much of a good lesson for not only children to see, but couples to see, for men to see, and the idea of having a wife who's more successful than you, and you being like, hey, yes, I'm going to move my life for her job because that's what she wants to do, and I love her. That's fantastic.
I love that for Cory. I gotta say, like, everything you just said is very accurate, and I love that for Cory. It's not enough to, like, move me in this episode. It's not enough to, like, make me feel like, oh, wow, this is a series finale. But the thing that does, and my favorite aspect of the show, and is what you just mentioned, was focusing on Topanga's fear of failure. Because since season 5, when she's like, I think I'm going to go to Yale, you and I have been saying, like, she didn't choose Yale, and it's because she's afraid to be a small fish in a big pond. If you go back and listen to our season 5, like, ending, like, the last few episodes, we're angry with how no one is challenging Topanga. Correct. No one is trying to get to, like, the core issue that Topanga's dealing with. Everyone keeps trying to make it about Cory when it's not. And so for Feeny to go, you know that Topanga came and talked to me before she proposed to you, and it had nothing to do with you. Like, I love that. I love that, like, Cory's saying, like, you know what? I can see that Topanga has a fear of failure because we've known her to be a perfectionist. This
Correct.
actually all makes sense. So the fact that it's like returning to that season 5 question of can you be a big fish in a big pond, and going back to that, and like the Yale decision never really went away, like it's affecting all of this. And so for that to kind of come back and to us to get some completion at least on Topanga's arc and storyline is the one thing that I'm in love with this episode. Yes, I love the clips. I think the rest of the storyline's kind of muddled, but the fact that Topanga's getting the ending she deserves, I'm here for that.
Yes, because to your point, they kind of retcon it a little bit, and they go, "Oh no, that choice was never about you," and it kind of says that Feeny understood even back then that she chose to stay because she didn't want to be challenged.
Yeah,
Feeny, they show it. They say Feeny says, "There's no reason for me not to go to Yale unless I can have a good reason."
And she made a reason. She invented a reason.
She invented a reason. So what Feeny probably said was exactly, there's no reason for you not to go to Yale. Unless you can find a good one, go.
And for Cory to now be the reason that she does go is great.
Again, look, lovely. Now, I will say, I know it's hard listening to us. As much praise as I want to give it, it is upsetting that we don't let Topanga have that conversation with Feeny.
Yeah.
Why do we I understand why we need to show Cory have that conversation with Feeny, because it not only is it Boy Meets World, but it kind of shows it gives reason to Cory making the about turn and actually be present. But how great would it have been to at least see Topanga leave Feeny's house?
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, when I looked at this episode again, I was like, we have removed all of Topanga's agency.
Yes.
In the last episode, they told us that she was going. This episode, we don't see her until she says, actually, we don't need to go.
Yeah.
And then that's when he's like, again, she says, we don't need to go, and they leave, and that's it. That's all she says. We don't get the resolution to where she decides she didn't want to go, or she thought it over, or all this other stuff. We don't get her conversation with Feeny. We see her again when Cory says, I think you should go, which I love. I love that. And then after that, we see her pack up Shawn's things, not her own, and she's just kind of standing by while everyone else says their goodbyes.
You know what's interesting about Topanga being the one to pack Shawn's shit? Is everything we know about her insecurities of Shawn and Cory's relationship. And it's so interesting because, again, all of this happens off screen. We don't know what was going on, but it almost feels like Topanga's like, the only way I can really assure that this is going to happen is if I get Shawn to come with us. That's the only way to guarantee this.
It's so funny that you say that, because while you were coming up with that, it hit me. Does she bring Shawn because she's like, I've never had to deal with Cory on my own?
That's a great point.
I don't know if I could do it on my own. In fact, if I go and I'm successful and I'm trying to climb up the ladder and Cory has nothing else to do, he'll sabotage me.
Ooh.
So by bringing Shawn along, I'm actually using Shawn as a buffer to keep my marriage intact, because otherwise, I don't know if we'll make it.
And also,
that's actually really good. I never thought about it. But
and Topanga's like, I'm in an internship. I'm going to be in school. I'm going to be in law school. I need something for this fucker to do while I'm busy.
Correct.
And I don't need him destroying the house. I don't need him over fixating on me. He needs someone else to hang out with. Which, by the way, can you even imagine Cory and Shawn just like being New Yorkers? It seems so strange. Like, they're the most like 2% milk characters on television. To think about them becoming New Yorkers is so funny to me.
So it's so funny that you say that, because I have two responses to that. One would be that this idea of Topanga being like, I know I can't trust him to pick up a hobby. Last time I left him alone at a ski lodge, he just started making out with somebody else. So she's like, I need Shawn there to watch Cory at all times. Because who else is there? Eric,
Exactly.
But
And honestly, it would have done, I think, a lot to show a growth and a change and a learn from the wedding fiasco. To have Topanga come to appreciate the role that Shawn plays in it, almost like I feel like Lily has that for Ted on How I Met Your Mother with Lily and Marshall.
Yes.
It's like, I understand the role that you play in this relationship and I appreciate it. I wish that we would have gotten that other than just a here's your suitcase, you're coming with us. Like that was supposed to speak that, but it didn't. Again, we're not seeing any, we're just being kind of told things here and there and off, and it's
and that's kind of my thing, is that this show constantly tells us what happened and tells us what's going on without showing us.
Yeah.
And I just wish that it showed us a little bit more, because the other thing that I was going to say right in line with this was, like, can you imagine them being New Yorkers? I can't imagine Shawn being a New Yorker. I absolutely think that Shawn, if they had given Shawn a reason to be like, oh my God, the cafes, the poetry, the Brooklyn, all this other stuff. If they had like painted
this was 90s Brooklyn. This wasn't.
I know, but I'm just saying, if they had painted a picture of the arts loving, museum going, poetry reading individual in Washington Square Park, where all of these greats have been and gone before, and he was going, even if he himself was like, maybe I'll visit you every once in a while. You know, they got a lot of really cool bookshops or whatever up there. My photography, like, they could have given any reason, because this version of Shawn, not the older version, but this version of Shawn, actually makes sense in New York, just like he makes sense in Europe. But you just need to give him reasons to go, and we don't do that. And we just kind of say, hey, you're coming along, and we do so for the sake of Cory, not for the sake of the character.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. In reality, this is part one. Now y'all see why we broke it up, because this was just part one. We got a whole other conversation to go. So we're going to wrap up this conversation. Before we do, what do you think is the Feeny lesson of this episode?
I mean, I would love to say all good things come to an end. Like, it's just like changes, like it happens. But again, like, they don't even commit to, Cory, you're going to have to adjust to a life without Shawn or your brother. Like, they keep everything's kind of normal. They almost set it up for a spin-off show in a way that is like kind of obvious, but just also disappointing that it doesn't really come to fruition that way. So yeah, I'm not really sure what the lesson is. I think probably the lesson has to do with Topanga and Cory, and Cory's decision to push Topanga to overcome her fears, I guess. Maybe something.
I was gonna say, I think that the lesson is what Feeny says.
The flower metaphor.
It's the flower metaphor. It's the idea of, it's not that I thought that you would do better in the world, it's that you would stop growing. And that is more important. So anyway, I just thought that was a great metaphor. I thought that was a good one. Do you have a bruh moment?
Yeah, my bruh moment is the absence of Angela, really.
Yeah, honestly, totally understandable. We get one clip, for those of you who are like, they do show Angela. We get one clip, and it's between Shawn and Cory and Angela, when Angela's like, why did you show him that?
In fact, I think she makes the same amount of appearances as Eli in this episode.
Correct.
Like,
which
it's
is
so
why
strange.
I said the fact that we treat her on the same level as Eli is kind of unforgivable. Okay, what grade are you giving this?
You know, it's so interesting. Like, obviously, this is a part one, so I have to remember that. And I'm trying to, like, kind of find a happy medium between appreciating the show and what it is and what it's giving me versus this, like, well, there's still things I have questions about. There's still stories I would like wrapped up differently. Because I do think that the truth of how I feel about this episode is probably somewhere in between there. So because of that, I'm going to give part one a B+. And we'll see how I feel at the end of part two.
I love that. I'm going to give it a B. I think
Okay.
like I specifically, after everything that we talked about and the fact that if you remove the clips, it doesn't really work. I
Yeah.
think that it's a great episode. I enjoyed it. I love the clips that they did chose. I already talked about like the fact that Eric hitting his head on the dumpster. Not good for him, but hilarious. I loved
Yeah.
watching it. Yeah, I'm happy with it. I am both excited and not excited to watch the final episode, but I think that this overall was a B episode.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining. We are going to go into our homework, but before we do that, we also want to remind you guys about our Patreon. We have our mixtapes up there. We
Mhm.
have bonus context. We have our Pod Meets World rewatch. So if you're into all of those things, please join our Patreon. Give us your feedback. Let us know. It's $3 a month, and we really appreciate it.
Boom. And don't you worry. I know we're ending season 7, but we're still going to have content on our Patreon for way longer than that. So,
Correct. Okay. Homework. What homework do you have?
you know, I hate to sound boring because I know that like people have been talking about this as homework for a long time, but I finally binged season 1 and 2 of The Bear in preparation for season 3.
You did.
And yeah, it's great. You know, it's so funny. Like, I don't know what I thought this show was from the
It's not.
outside. It's not that, and it's also such like a simple premise for a television show. It's just a work comedy. You know what I mean? It's just a work comedy that takes place in a restaurant. And so I love the characters and everything. The only thing I have to say about this show, which I was actually surprised with, is that it's the format of a sitcom, but a drama.
Yeah. A lot of people
a half an hour drama is interesting. But once I got over the fact that I was like, okay, this isn't a sitcom, I was on board with it. It just, I had to make that switch of like a 30-minute drama. That's interesting.
It's a very interesting show because it breaks so many rules.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also like, it had a lot of controversy behind it because it's also listed as a comedy.
Yeah.
But again, I think that it's listed as a comedy more for its length
Sure.
than it is for its content, even though it does have some really funny moments. I just think that like how we discuss comedies and dramas are more of like how they make us feel lately, and sometimes they actually have more definitions that are around their format and how they are constructed. So
yeah,
that's all. But yeah, I'm so glad you finally watched it.
Honestly, the writing is so great. I love the pacing of the episode. I think it does such a good job of showing the anxiety of working at a restaurant and working in that industry.
Yeah.
I loved like I mean just the character of Bear, like Chef, what am I thinking? What's his name? I keep
God, in the show, you're yeah.
I just keep calling him Chef.
Yeah.
Carmy Bear. Yeah, I love him. I just think the show is really well done. Again, I'm like fresh off of it, so I haven't really gotten a chance to like marinate on it the way I want to, but I was really impressed with it. And again, I watched all of it in like, I don't know, like a day or two. So it's very fresh.
Okay. Thank you. My homework, I'm not gonna lie, I have so many things to like pull. I'm gonna do one like highbrow and one that's just kind of like I'm addicted to it. And my highbrow one is Inside Out 2. That came
I saw
out.
it. Yeah.
I just based on everything that we were talking about, growing, changing, new shifts in your life, how you handle that, what kind of person you are.
Mm-hmm.
I think Inside Out 2, I thought it was more sophisticated and like they were really challenging themselves. I don't think I liked it more than the first one because it just wasn't.
I liked it more.
You liked it more.
I liked it more than the first one.
I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah.
But I didn't like it as much as the first one, but I did appreciate everything that they did to bring us back into this world, to expand the world.
Sure.
And introduce us to these new characters.
Yeah.
I have been saying, I think the emotions driving mine are anxiety and ennui. And I feel like they just take shifts.
Well, you know what was really fun about watching this episode is I saw it like opening weekend in like a crowded theater with a bunch of kids, and it was so interesting hearing like a 3-year-old say the word anxiety when they left the theater, and I was just like, wow, like this movie is educating children on emotions that I would wasn't aware of until I was like in my
Correct.
20s. So like it takes such a complex premise and simplifies it in a way that I think, I mean, it was well done the first time, but like I said, I kind of preferred this time, the second telling of it. But either way, it's great what it's doing to children.
I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Okay, and then my second one that's a little lower brow, Love Island USA. I was not a reality TV person. I usually only put on Love Island because my husband likes that stuff, and I was like, fine. This season has been nonstop. Every single episode is dramatic. The cast, again, I'm not even a huge Love Island person, but all of the people who are like, no, you don't understand. This is as good as it's ever been.
Yeah.
And the fact that the US is better than the UK, which never happens. This season of Love Island, I'm telling you right now, Peacock has earned its place in my household.
Peacock has earned their monthly subscription from me.
They really
they
did.
come through.
They come through. So yeah, if you want something a little less heady and something a little bit more just silly drama than Love Island USA, this season 6 has been really entertaining. So.
Okay, well, let's check it out.
All right, you guys. This again is our penultimate Boy Meets World episode. So make sure that you reach out to us, tell us your thoughts, hit us up at Bro Meets World on all the places. Check out our Patreon, check out our merch shop. We appreciate hearing from you. We appreciate you being on this journey with us. If you are listening to us in the future, let us know how it's going. Warn us about anything that you can.
Yes.
And if you're listening to this with us now, we really do appreciate you guys being on this journey with us. And we look forward to talking to you more about the finale.
We're going to be back next week where we finish part 2. We're also going to be doing a season 7 recap as well as a big giant Boy Meets World series recap. So there's other things to look forward to in the coming weeks as we close out our journey with Boy Meets World.
All right. I think this time where we tell you to dream.
It feels emotional because we're at that episode now.
Yeah.
But, dream, try,
and do good.
Later, bros.
Later, bros.
This episode of Bro Meets World was produced by Ceej and edited by Tony Curtis. Bro Meets World is a 2 Free Tokens media production.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
When this boy meets world.
Join Jackie and Danielle, 2 best friends and ex-Blockbuster employees who are rewatching some of their favorite movies from the late 90s and early 2000s on the No More Late Fees podcast. And remember, be kind and rewind.